Today, we're going to be talking about why building a business sometimes feels harder than it actually is, or I guess how harder than I guess it should be. And I think first off, one of the things to discuss is as entrepreneurs, we need to understand going into building a business, starting a business, or even growing our business, or maybe growing one of our hobbies into a real business. We need to understand it's going to be a difficult road. Now, I know nowadays with social media, there's a lot of maybe some confusion out there of managing the expectations of what being an entrepreneur is really like. I think there's a lot of people that are trying to sell you something that are on social media, essentially trying to make it seem easier than it is. And these people saying, I only work a couple hours a week and I make $20,000 a month and I can show you how, all these different things. For one, most of them probably aren't true. For two, even the ones that may be semi-true, typically this is a individual product or a service or something that this person is doing for them as an individual, as opposed to being an actual entrepreneur and founder of a business and building a large business. So it's definitely a little bit different. Even if you see some of these social media type stories and they are real of people putting in not that many hours for a large pay because they've figured something out, it's typically not going to be an actual entrepreneur that's building a large business. So I think that kind of puts some misconception out there from the start. Now, one thing I want to address is with the difficult of owning a business and building a business is that it's not just about working hard, and it's not just about working smart. It's a lot of the difficulty comes from the mental stress and the tax that you take mentally from running a company. It's a lot different than being an employee and having all that relief of not having the responsibility to pay the bills, to pay payroll, to have it all on your back, whether you get paid or not. These are things that a lot of the time as an employee you may take for granted, and you're not going to take that for granted anymore once you've started or ran a business. That's definitely something where you're going to say, wow, what a mental relief it was when I was an employee compared to when I'm the one that has to not only make the decisions, but also, live with the consequences of those decisions. So, a lot of the difficulty involved with starting or running a business doesn't even necessarily have to do with the crazy amount of hard work that you're inevitably going to have to put in. It also has to deal with the mental tax that takes its toll when you are the one ultimately responsible for everything. Now, I think where a lot of entrepreneurs get lost is in what I would call the expectation gap, meaning that what people think building a business is going to be like and what it's actually like, there's that gap there that a lot of people can't bridge because that gap exists in the early time. And I think that's why most businesses fail. And I think that's one of the reasons why most entrepreneurs fail. And remember, as an entrepreneur, we're never failed until we've stopped. But a lot of people stop during that gap of, I thought I was going to, explode very quickly, or I thought this business was going to catch on quickly, or I didn't know it was going to be this difficult or work this hard or be this mentally taxing for me to run this business. And there's always that gap there, even after being successful, even having other businesses. When you start a new business or try to grow a new venture, product, or service, it's always going to be the same. There's going to be that delayed gratification and that gap between what you thought was going to happen and what's actually happening. And that's a difficult, kind of gap to bridge. And for a lot of people, that's enough to take them out of the game. But you have to just believe in what you're doing and believe that you're working hard. And at the end of the day, it's all going to work itself out, especially if you can bridge that gap between that amount of time where you were excited about starting, you had certain expectations of what it was going to be like, and then the brutal reality hits you. And if you can keep going after that point, I think that's probably a turning point where there's a huge percentage of entrepreneurs that when you make it past that turning point, that's going to indicate that you're probably going to be successful. I think the majority of people drop out during that gap period. Now, on our last episode, we talked about the employee mindset and letting that go, which is another part of why it's difficult to start or run a business, is because most people are coming from being an employee. I happen to have never had a job and never been an employee because I started my businesses when I was young. And my first real business I started when I was 15 and it was successful. So I never had to actually go get a job. But most people are coming from a situation where they have a job currently or previously had a job. And there's that mind state shift that needs to happen. And a lot of that shift is the responsibility, the fact that you're now going to have to take responsibility for everything. We talked in the last episode about how payroll you're ultimately responsible for. And I would never recommend hiring somebody if the company can't pay the payroll and doesn't have the reserves, even if that person doesn't perform. And I would also make sure that you personally can cover the payroll, even if the company can't, because once you have people's livelihood and they're counting on that paycheck to put food on the table, that's a big responsibility. And I want to make sure that nobody takes it lightly. And, not only is it not the right thing to do, to potentially mess with somebody's livelihood, but it's also very scary for a business because there's a lot of laws that are in place to protect employees to get paid. And there's severe penalties for companies who break those rules, whether it was intentional or not. And, you know, I think another reason why people kind of make it harder to start a business than it really is because they're looking for approval from others, or they're scared of what others are going to think. And you've just got to get out of that mindset. Now, I know it's harder nowadays because typically you're going to need some type of base when you make your new company, product, or service, and you make all your social media pages. It's hard to go from zero to thousands without one follower to start it off. So you're typically going to be asking your friends and family to support your business, to follow you, to repost your stuff. And that's important because it gets the ball rolling and makes it a lot easier to get some other people. And the algorithm starts liking your account more because it says, hey, there's real people following and interacting. So it's going to start showing your content to more people. So all that kind of stuff is important now. The byproduct of that is that you have to put that idea out there to your friends and family. You wouldn't necessarily have to do that in the past. You could just do your work. They might not even know that you've ever started a business, but nowadays, for the most part, you're going to have to or want to put it out there into the world to your friends, family, and people that you know that you have this business and that you're giving this a go. And I think a lot of people are scared of that. And you've just got to get past that and understand that, again, if people see you fail, that's okay, especially because as an entrepreneur, we never fail as long as we keep going. So, a part of that comparing yourself to other entrepreneurs or being scared of the failure or what a lot of people think, I think nowadays a lot of people feel like they're behind. I think a lot of people may not even start because they feel like, well, there's all these other people I'm seeing, and maybe they're even younger than you, and you're feeling like I'm so far behind. Maybe there's an industry that's going on where you're saying, I wish I would have got in on the front end of that. I feel like I would be coming in on the back end of it. Some of the largest companies in the world came in, quote unquote, on the back end of things that somebody might say, oh, there's already all the established companies there. Nobody's going to take them out. And, plenty of people have. So you're never behind. Every journey is different as an entrepreneur. And it's never too late to become an entrepreneur. And it's never too late to get into a certain business if you're taking a new approach to it, or if you have new ideas within that industry or within that type of business. It's never too late to dominate an industry if that's what you want to do. So don't feel like you're behind. I think would be one piece of advice that I would give is don't compare yourself to other people in general, and don't feel like you're too behind. There's always time to become a successful entrepreneur. There's always time to build a successful business. Now, I want to talk about one of the issues here of why it feels so hard is because a lot of the times your progress feels invisible. So when your progress feels invisible, it's hard to have that motivation to keep going. Now, what I like to compare this to is something like a weight loss journey. And I've actually had a few weight loss journeys myself, where I've lost over 100 pounds and I gained some back, and then I lost another 100 pounds. So, I've been on some weight loss journeys myself. And I like to compare that gap that happens when you're building a business with the delayed gratification to the delayed gratification of a weight loss journey, because in both situations you have to put in the work for an extended period of time before you're going to start seeing the results. And it's all about staying motivated. A lot of people will tell you with something like a weight loss journey, it's all about staying motivated for those first 3 months is typically what it's going to take for you to start seeing and feeling results, as in you're going down a shirt size, and that will motivate you to go the rest of the way, right? So that gap of those few months where you're not seeing the results and there's a delayed gratification there are the hardest ones to get through. And I think it's the same with a business. You have to put in those reps every day and close that gap for when you start seeing those results will power you the rest of the way through and get you excited about it all over again. Just like when you're on a weight loss journey and you start being able to fit into new clothes and things like that, that gets you excited enough usually to carry you the rest of the way through. Now, it's important when you're running your business, starting your business, just like when you're starting a weight loss journey, to know that as long as you're doing the right things and putting in the work, that it is going to happen. So during those first 3 months of a weight loss journey, those are the hardest part because you're not seeing the results. So you're kind of wondering, is all this work I'm putting in every day, all this workout, all this eating right, is it actually working? But at the end of the day, especially from my experience, if as long as you're eating better and working out, it 100% will always equal weight loss. And as long as you're doing what you need to be doing with your business and you never stop, it's going to end up, becoming more successful. So you have to have that same mind state of, I might not be seeing the results right now, but I know as long as I keep my head down and I keep moving in the right direction, that eventually I will see the results. It's just going to be somewhat of a delayed gratification. Just like on a weight loss journey, it's almost the same thing with a business. So, again, when you are doing the right things, then you know you're on the right track. Now, some of the, I think, signs that you know you're doing the right things and that you're on the right track as a new entrepreneur or as an entrepreneur that's building a new company or product or service. I think some of those things include having clearer thoughts as you're putting in the work and as you're learning the business, the industry, and seeing how things are working. I think one of those kind of metrics you can go by is, do I have a lot more clear thought and understanding and kind of roadmap for what I'm doing? That will let you know that you're definitely going in the right direction. Things like being able to make faster decisions. So these are things that you can see along the way, where even though you're waiting for that delayed gratification of revenue or profitability or whatever it is, as long as you're having these things happen, it's kind of an internal indicator of I'm moving in the right direction, which again, one of those would be making faster decisions, which means you've learned a lot about what's going on, what works, what doesn't work, what you can do, what you can't do, the resources and time it would take you to do something. So you're making decisions a lot more quickly because you know the ins and outs, and that'll let you know, hey, I am getting somewhere here. I know what I can do, can't do. I know what I need to do, what I don't need to do. That'll let you know I'm definitely moving in the right direction, even if the revenue isn't reflecting that yet. Also, talking to customers. Talk to your customers, even if you're not making that many sales or no sales. Talk to the potential customers, your leads that didn't buy, and get that information to figure out if you're moving in the right direction. And the same thing with talking to your staff. If you do have staff at that point, talk to them, get the feedback. That will give you a good idea if you are moving in the right direction. You may not be seeing it in the revenue, but you may be feeling it with the responses from the customers or potential customers. You may be feeling it from your staff or get that advice or feedback that you need to kind of keep going. So that's another factor that you can look at as well and say, am I going in the right direction? And another one of those kind of internal indicators, if you're going in the right direction, even if the money isn't showing up yet, is really your disregard for what people think and your overcoming the fear of being rejected. Because as you get further and further into your business, as it starts to grow more, as you become more confident about it, you learn more about your business, your industry, what's going on, the potential future of the business. Those are the things that are going to, increase your confidence and save you from the fear of being rejected and also the fear of what everyone else is going to think. Because when you're in your business mode and you know the end goal and you start learning the ins and outs of the industry that you're in, it's just going to make you know, if I keep my head down and keep putting in this work, then the results will follow. And everybody else might not see that, but I've done my research and I know that that's the case. All right. So, how do you mentally survive the gap from starting your business to when you start getting that gratification, meaning sales and momentum? There's always at least a couple months and sometimes a couple years of that gap to bridge of, needing to put in all this work and seeing the results. So, we talked about some indicators that you can kind of look at yourself. Now let's talk about some of the kind of mechanisms you can use to get over that or to help with that. One of those is making short-term goals. So you always want to have long-term goals, but having short-term goals as well is going to allow you to feel like more is being accomplished, even though you might not be at the point where you're seeing the results of those accomplishments. But having those shorter term goals that you can check off on a daily or weekly or monthly basis, preferably daily or weekly, is going to allow you to get more in the mind state of, yes, even though the money's not showing up yet or the business isn't where I want it to be yet, I am making the progress that I'm trying to make. Now, I will say something that's very powerful, and a lot of successful entrepreneurs talk about this, is writing down your goals. Long term goals is typically what most people think of and talk about and write down when we're talking about goals. But the short term goals I feel are very important. These are like weekly goals. And when you get down to that weekly goal, I think it's very important to have a box to check off by that goal. And this also goes for having a daily list of goals or things to do to complete that day. There's something about having it written down. And then there's also something about checking a box next to it. Maybe it's on a computer and you put an actual checkbox there and click the checkbox. maybe it's written down on paper and you put a little actual physical check mark next to it with a pen. There's something about checking off that box that is inspirational, even if it's subconscious, to where, yes, you might have things written down to do or goals, and you might even accomplish some of them, but there's literally a intrinsic value of checking off the box, whether it's consciously or subconsciously. You're showing yourself that little bit of gratification. It's almost like that little hit of dopamine that they say we get from people liking and commenting on our social media pages. It's somewhat like that of, hey, I accomplished something that I was supposed to accomplish and checked it off, and I'm on to the next one. So I think one way to give yourself a little bit more instant gratification while you're in that gap of waiting for the delayed gratification of sales and revenue and growth, I think setting up smaller short-term goals, even weekly or daily, that you can actually accomplish consistently and check off and feel like you're moving forward. Now, I would also say that part of those goals and making those short term goals is making very realistic wins and kind of changing of how you think about wins. Instead of only having your long term plan and long term goals written out, that's a long way from being able to say it's a win. But redefining your wins as smaller wins will definitely make you feel a lot better and help you carry through that gap of starting the business and having the business become successful, which is the hardest part of starting a new business. All right. So, with that being said, let's go ahead and take some questions here. We always do some questions at the end of the episode. We do stream this live on YouTube, Facebook, X, Twitch, Kick, all the different platforms. So you can drop a comment on any of those platforms and I can see them here live and answer them. And you can also send us any questions ahead of time through our DMs to at Kyle Hiersche or at Founding Without Funding. And so I do have some questions here to go over. So I'll go ahead and get to them here. So Lauren is asking, is it normal to feel excited one day and completely lost the next day when building a business? Yes, it's absolutely possible to feel lost one day and feel like you're doing everything on point the next day and then feeling lost again when you're building a new business. And that's okay as long as you keep going. Also, having the more long-term goals written down, the more short-term goals written down, a to-do list written down, those are the things that are going to help you feel less lost in the process. But I think all entrepreneurs, even successful ones, and even on a daily basis, as entrepreneurs, we all face that of sometimes feeling like we don't know what we're doing or we're completely lost. And the key is just to keep going, making sure you're doing your research, making sure you're putting in the work. And I think eventually, as long as you're doing those things, you're going to end up back on your feet, feeling like you have control again and know what you're doing and have a clear vision of where you're going, especially if you can write down your goals and stick to them. Okay, question here from Kevin. Kevin's asking, I feel like everyone else knows what they're doing and I don't. Is that normal or am I behind? So no, don't feel like you're behind according to anyone. Don't compare your journey as an entrepreneur to anyone else's journey. One thing about being an entrepreneur is everyone's journey is very different. There's usually things that tie everyone's journey kind of together, which is typically going to be hard work and time and effort. But everybody's journey is different. And that's one of the things about being an entrepreneur. You could start a company as early as, 15, like I did, or you could start a company when you're 70 and become successful, and people have. I just saw a post today, just kind of one of those inspirational posts of that at, I believe it was the age of 52, that Ray Kroc from McDonald's was, a milkshake machine salesman or whatever, and was diabetic and poor at the age of 52. And obviously he, created one of the biggest companies on earth, which is McDonald's. And so it's never too late to get started as an entrepreneur. So don't ever feel like you're behind, and don't compare yourself to other entrepreneurs' journey. Compare yourself, to the goals you've made for yourself, and where you are in accomplishing those goals. All right. Tara or Tara, not sure how to pronounce your name. I apologize. So Tara's asking, how do you deal with the awkward phase where you don't feel like a real business owner yet? So, how do you deal with that awkward phase between when you've started your business and you don't feel like a real business? I think just understand that every business goes through that. Every business, even a business with like big funding, is, technically not a quote unquote real business till it's actually making money. And even businesses with massive amounts of funding, there's always going to be that delay period from when the businesses start and when it's being built and to where real revenue is coming in. So just know that everybody goes through that. All the most successful people in the world, successful companies in the world have been through that as well. So just take that as part of the game and just keep moving forward, I would say. All right. Question here from Chris. Did you ever feel like quitting just because things felt unclear, not because they weren't working? I would say that personally, I don't mind if things are unclear as long as they are working. To me, the marketplace purchasing your product or service justifies your business and what you're doing and validates it. So even if I'm unclear about how that's happening or why it's happening, whatever the case is, I don't really care as long as it's working. And I can always dive into more about why it's working. But here's a great quote from one of my favorite motivational speakers, Jim Rohn, which is that some pick the fruit and some study the roots. You want to be the one picking the fruit. Sometimes you don't know why something's working. It's just working. And instead of sitting there and trying to figure out why it's working, sometimes you just have to work it and actually pick the fruit as opposed to study the roots. So while you do want to figure out why is this ad not working and this one is, or, why is this or that working, don't spend too much time on studying the roots. Make sure you're spending your time picking the fruit. That would be my answer to that. Okay. Question from Jasmine here. How do you explain what you do to people when your business is still evolving? So, how do you explain to people what you're doing when your business is still evolving? Well, I explain to people that I'm an entrepreneur and that I'm following my dreams. So if you're worried about what other people think or worried about how to explain what you're doing to other people, whether it's friends, family, at a party, event, whatever it is, I would say that you're following your dreams. If someone asks you what you do, say I'm an entrepreneur and I'm following my dreams. I mean, how powerful of a statement is that? How powerful is that in a conversation as opposed to, oh, I do this or oh, I do that? You say, well, I'm currently an entrepreneur that's following my dreams and I'm on my way to making them come true. That's powerful. And that's a great way to make yourself feel better about what you're doing, make yourself feel more confident that no matter what happens or anybody says or tries to talk negative or look down on it, what could be better than you following your dreams? And in my opinion, as long as you're following that dream and you are being the entrepreneur and moving forward and putting in the work, that is a beautiful thing and you're already succeeding, especially if you've made that commitment in your mind that you will not stop until you succeed. And then even after that, won't stop building it. You've already won. As long as your mind is in that state that you're not going to stop and that you're currently doing what it takes to pursue your dreams, that's all that matters. You're already on your way. So I would say to that question, when people ask you what you're doing and you're still forming your business, or you can't really tell them something concrete, or you're afraid of what they're going to say, make a powerful statement of saying, what I do is I'm building a new business and I'm following my dream. That's a powerful statement. Okay, let's go ahead and wrap it up here for today. Definitely appreciate everybody tuning in, and we will catch you on the next episode.